A very good morning to everyone. I'm Binks from the Culture Academy, and I will be MC for today's webinar. For those who are joining us for the first time, welcome to Culture Academy's 7th online edition of the In Conversation With series. Today's webinar is the first webinar for 2021. We have about 120 attendees today. To our friends from overseas who are tuning in, a warm welcome to you. Our In Conversation With series offers an open platform for the arts and culture sector leaders, professionals, and administrators to come together to present or share any aspect of their work and insights. This allows more interesting discussions and cross-pollination of ideas and sharing of best practices on issues that matters to the arts and culture sector. Today, we are very pleased to have with us Ms. Usha Menon, Executive Chairman UMMC Asia Private Limited, Ms. Lisistrata, Lusandiana, Executive Director, Indonesian Visual Art Archive, and Mr. Kola, Director, Partnership Development, National Gallery Singapore, who will be sharing their views and insights on the topic of fiscal sustainability in the new normal. The session will be moderated by Ms. Jane Binks, Senior Director, Office of President, Development of Yale and US College. Once again, please feel free to post your questions under the Q&A function anytime, and our speakers will be able to address them during the Q&A session. Without further ado, I will now hand the time over to our moderator, Ms. Jane Binks, to introduce the webinar and the speakers. Jane, over to you, please.
Good morning and a warm welcome to everyone who's joining us this morning. I know as a member of the fundraising philanthropic community in Singapore and well around the world that people are very interested in this topic, wondering what we do now in this new normal, as people are calling it. So we're delighted to have 3 experts to talk about their responses and observations about this new normal. We're going to start with Usha Menon, who many of you may know. We'll do a 10-minute presentation there. Then we'll go on to Lisis, who is phoning in from Indonesia, and then Kola, who is the Director of Partnerships. So we'll spend about 10 minutes each giving a presentation, and then we'll break out into a panel. Now, some of you have already sent some questions about, what kind of engagement strategies we should be using, what are some of the challenges and opportunities. So please do feel free to continue to give those kinds of questions throughout the seminar, and we will note those and include them during the panel session. So with that, I'm going to turn this over to Usha.
Good morning. So everybody can see the slides? Yes. Good morning. And apa khabar for those of you from Indonesia and Malaysia and Brunei. Today we're going to talk about fiscal sustainability in the new normal. And what I wanted to share is really, what does fiscal sustainability really mean to, especially an arts organization, but for any organization? And for that matter, I even mean for-profit and non-for-profit. But we will, of course, focus on, to a large extent, the non-profit part of. But any organization, what does fiscal sustainability mean? And in the arts, working with them and observing them, what I find is the traditional conflict between the creative mission of the organization and the management objectives does create many missed opportunity, because the creative mission and the management objectives don't generally work as a team. Now, I'm not saying your organization is like that, but my observation is many organizations is like that, where the creative team kind of gets on with their creative work and the management team gets on with their management work. But the culture that's created, where the culture of fundraising, the culture of philanthropy doesn't exist. We do our piece, and then somewhere along the way, the fundraiser figures out how to kind of make the twine meet. So that's what I find is where there's a big missed opportunity to improve the organizational, the financial, and the artistic performance of organizations, because it doesn't start philanthropy and fundraising and sustainability questions does not necessarily start at the head, at the leadership positions. So I'm going to talk to you about the arc of the new normal. In order to be sustainable, I've found we need three things. One is adaptability, and COVID has given us a real good reason why adaptability is so important. And the resilience, and I'll give you examples or ideas of what I mean by this. And the third one is creativity. Of course, you come from the art sector, you kind of like the flag bearers of creativity. But when it comes to sustainability as well as the fiscal health of the organization, how creative are you? So those are some of the questions I want to leave you with, and later in the panel, we can further flesh it out. So talking about adaptability, it's preparedness and disaster response. If you're a commercial company, highly likely, if you're the government, we have our reserves as preparedness and disaster response, right? From a government point of view. From a private sector company point of view, like I'm a consultant, right? That works only with the nonprofit sector or the social impact sector. I, as the founder of my entity, have to figure out what happens if, the pipeline of orders or clients dry up. Do I have enough reserve to tide me over, or do I have other ways in which I would, we do that in our own families, we figure out. So when it comes to our arts entity, how are we preparing now for the disaster that will come? And now, while we are in the midst of it and knowing what it is like, it's about time that we really start thinking of these three key questions. One is on the readiness of your organization in order to be that prepared and adaptable. How ready are you to weather the crisis while leveraging the opportunity? So we have to address the crisis, but in the crisis, there are other opportunities. If we are only firefighting, where is the time, energy, or the resource to leverage the opportunities that literally is staring at us in our face? But we just don't have the bandwidth because we're just fighting the fire. So how are we ensuring as an organization we have the readiness? And that question has to be asked not just by the fundraiser or the executive director. It has to start at the board, at the senior management level, and then departments, as team, thinking of these questions relevant to their space. And then once you have that, you have to figure out what are your strategic aims, both the creative as well as the operational, to meet the financial crisis. So in the Singapore context, we are fortunate when it comes to human resources. We had the job support scheme at the height of the crisis. What if you didn't have that? And in many countries, you don't have that. How will you maintain the staff who are passionate about your organization, but still have to keep their body and soul together in the time of crisis? So how are you going to tide over that? So that's a question we need to ask now in preparation for the next crisis. And we know crises are going to happen. In the past, it used to be far apart. Now it's getting closer and closer. I mean, we're in Singapore, we're already phase 2 back again. And this may go up and down for the next few years to come. It's not like we're going to get vaccinated and it's all going to be hunky-dory. We know it's not going to be hunky-dory. So that next phase of the crisis is going to come, and we know it's going to come. So what questions are you asking at the leadership level? And then, of course, the recovery. What will success look like? And what needs to be done now in order to get there? So I want you to think at that level. I'll go into later on in the details, but really looking at, it's not about, you cannot be fiscally sustainable if you're not taking a strategic view of what will it take to get to where you want to be in the next 5 years, for example. So that's the adaptability part that I wanted to share with you. The next one is fiscal resilience. And since we're talking about fiscal sustainability, I'm going to talk about fiscal management. How financially literate are we, our decision makers even, to understand where our income sources are, whether it be ticket sales, whether it be admissions. Some of you have rental income. Some of you have investments. Investment income, do you even have enough money to invest to make it viable? And if you decide that you want to get there, what will you do to get there? Then you have your philanthropic contribution, be it individual, be it foundations, be it corporation. And of course, in the Singapore context, we have government guides and in many country contexts, but exceptionally in the Singapore context, with the various grants that is available for audience development, for production, for creation, for seed, for startups, all of that. How are we fully leveraging it and making the best of it? So if you do get government grants, do you just say we get government grants, or do you position it as a matching fund, for example, in order to increase? As you know, matching funds always. So if you say that 50% of our requirements is funded by the government in the Singapore context, say, then to say all we're looking for is a match from the philanthropic contribution. How do you position it so that you're leveraging what you have to make the best of your philanthropic and fundraising responses? And usually, as we know, when we position it that way, the responses are a lot better than if you just go for the first dollar. And there's like, the whole behavioral science behind how you position some of these income sources as ways in which to jumpstart or even enhance or to give the quantum leap to your fundraising. Once you know where your income sources come from, you need to know where your expenses are. Whether it is the artistic, the production, the marketing, the research, the training, the governance, the fundraising. What kind of investments do you do in fundraising? In the Singapore context, we are allowed 30% for every dollar you raise. You're allowed 30%, some other countries lesser. How are we using that, utilizing that ability? Or are we in the Charles Dickenian mindset that, oh, it's okay to be poor, poor is glamorous, as opposed to, no, we're gonna invest. So if I ask you, do you know what is your fundraising investment? How much of what you raise, what proportion of that is actually invested back into your fundraising? And it's a penny wise, pound foolish kind of situation if you say, oh, well, let's not put into fundraising, and then you want fundraising to thrive. There has to be a business decision being made. And once you bump it up, automatically the percentage comes down. But is that kind of decision being made? When you do your budgeting, is your pricing strategy looking at your overall budgeting, the entire need of the organization, including investments in not just your creative output, but also in your fundraising philanthropy output, in ensuring your trust and brand is built? Have you budgeted those things, your indirect cost, as they call it? The cost of the CEO, who, while his salary is one cost, but how is it apportioned into your pricing strategy? Or is it, this is what it costs to put this show together, and this is how much we will price the ticket or the number of footfalls you need. So those kind of questions are important because fundraising and philanthropy, fundraising and finance are two sides of the same coin. I've been in this for over 33 years, and never have I been able to take the two apart, because if one is good, the other is better. If they're different, it doesn't work as well. And then you need to know your cash flow. Do at the management level, do at the divisional head level, do at the fundraising level. Know when the peaks and troughs are when it comes to the income, as well as the peaks and troughs when it comes to expenses. Do you understand which month you need a certain inflow of funds because there is this, there's an insurance to be paid, or there is a 13-month bonus to be paid, or whatever, the Do you know where those peaks are? And all that is being budgeted into your system. And then, of course, your reserve. In the income, we talked about investment. But what about, do you have money set aside for the rainy day, so to say? And how is that being invested? Of course, if you have a tiny pot, obviously the investment income won't be that impressive. But how do you get to a point where you know you will set aside, whether you're a for-profit or a not-for-profit, setting aside some parts of your income so that you can tide through the rainy days, as well as some of the government grants, because sometimes it is based on reimbursement. You need to spend it first before, and you report, and then you get reimbursed. Where is the money to front that kind of a requirement? You need to have that pot available, unrestricted and available, in order to make sure that you can manage your fiscal requirements in a way that you can be sustainable. And hence my R stands for resilience, i.e. financial or fiscal management, and fiscal literacy or financial literacy being an important component of the organizational skill, not just left to the treasurer or the accounts manager. The third part is creativity. Of course, the art sector is known for, you guys, as I mentioned, you're the pallbearers of creativity, to experiment, to provoke, to break boundaries. Are you, when it comes to your own organization? Maybe you are, in which chances are you're thriving? If you're not, highly likely you're just surviving. So when I think of a mindset, these are some of the examples of mindset related to philanthropy that I want to try and provoke. One is the market size and potential. Given the situation, we have opened up the whole online ability, right? We have opened up the potential for audience coming from anywhere in the world, not just from Amokyo or Badok, right? It could be from anywhere in the world. So the market size, if we are digital enough and we can think of ways we can get online with it, our market potential is a lot more. And I wanted to highlight this. I mean, all of us know the Metacowan story of the non-fungible token. And he's based here in Singapore, and he gave 93 million for a digital work at Christie's. And the spokesperson for Christie's says that tells us there's an entire new category of buyers. My question to you is, where are your entirely new category of supporters? Supporters, donors, philanthropists, collaborators. Where is that entire new category that we know has opened up, but have you identified and figured a way to link with them? Ticketing, right? So we have universities. I'm involved with LaSalle myself, where all this while it has been about paying for courses. Here is just one example of how NASA and Metacowan have got together, and they are now getting young people to really learn how to say crypto stories. So it's not just about storytelling, but it's about crypto storytelling. Getting together to get non-fungible token artists and innovators, and they're going to create an alumni. And they don't even have to pay for the training. They get paid in 3 Ethereums. And if you know the cost of the Ethereums is like over 4,000, 5,000 currently as of this morning. That's about, you get paid 12,000 to take this course. So think about it. Where is your model of pricing and your model of delivering services? If this is some of the ways in which the world may be going to, and this is happening right here in Singapore. I'm not even talking of UK or USA. I'm talking of Singapore. So that whole new world of crypto millionaires, crypto, artists that's turning up. Where are we leveraging, collaborating to ensure that we are ready for the next normal. And I'm not even saying new normal because that new normal is already here. This is an example of the new normal. I'm talking of the next normal when these people come out into the market and are so much more cool, sometimes. All right. So in relation to that, the whole trend, of viewership or time spent, gaming and streaming has become such an important component of lifestyle. How are we, in the 80s and 90s, going to the galleries or going to the a show or going, for a performance, maybe have been the lifestyle. When this new generation is growing up online as streamers, how are you getting ready for that generation while still building on your current base of patrons and supporters and viewers? How are you getting this new normal into your fundraising and organizational creative thinking? So the rise of Twitch streamers, for example, and if you look at Twitch, this is their Twitch bootcamp, right? Charity fundraising on Twitch. How many of you actually have Twitch streamers who are using their influence? And they even have cheat sheets about how to raise money for charity. And here, when you think charity, generally people think human care, animal care, planet care. How are you positioning arts as a need? And especially with this new normal, we know wellness has become a huge component. How are we collaborating to ensure that art and wellness become, and I think Kola will talk a little more about that later, I think, but how are we ensuring that when people think charity, they think the art too? And I'm not just talking about the patrons of the art or who give big bucks. I'm talking about the masses who can mobilize in support, because it's this mass that's tomorrow going to be the patron. And if you haven't started the journey, you've lost that component that could have been yours, and hence the next normal. Market size. In the past, we have folks like Andy Chua bidding $2 million just so that he can have lunch with Warren Buffett. Now the financial market is changing. The wellness market is changing. The mindfulness, the good things in life kind of thing, So while the banks and the financial market is still glamorous, there's so much more that is the new normal. How are we, where is that Andy Chua from across, UK or from Australia, who will want to talk to somebody in Singapore and willing to pay $2 million? And you guys have that kind of, and especially in the context of Asia, everybody is looking to Asia because Asia is the new normal now. Everybody is looking towards Asia, of how Asians think. What are some of the Asian trends? What are there insights that you can offer related to art, related to performance, related to mindfulness and mental health and creativity and all of that people would want to bid $2 million to come and without even necessarily flying in because of the online presence, to get into the head of someone who can be positioned as a influencer. And Asian influencers are doing brilliantly across the world. How are we Asian artists creating influencers who will be worth $2 million? Or start at 20,000. I'm not talking about the number tag, but are we creating that kind of brand value that we Asians can, inform the rest of the world with? And we know everybody's looking towards Asia. How are we ensuring we're providing that kind of value to the rest of the world through what we are good at? And I'm not, while I talk about the $2 million, here is a young woman, 10 years of age, who ran 18 campaigns during the last 1 year and raised $250,000 just by herself. Incidentally, Ruji's dad used to work for the Singapore Symphony Orchestra, and he's one of the, kind of the person who inspired her to be a fundraiser. And this young woman, 18 campaigns. Where are all our students of the art? Is there a way we can collaborate? I mean, we applaud, now we're going to have a university for the arts, not just colleges for the arts. What about all the alumni there? Can they be inspired, like Ruji was, to be a fundraiser? You could collaborate with them so that they could run 18 little campaigns over a course of 12 months for things that they're actually really passionate for because they're studying for it. Highly likely their parents want them to be doctors and engineers, but they chose to take the art. And yet we are not utilizing that sort of alumni that we have to collaborate and get them to think of what's possible, like in this case. And it's not an old story, it's a current story, right? Of being able to raise $250,000 just one person, and a 10-year-old at that. Imagine the possibilities of getting the masses mobilized to believe in the arts if you really thought of it creatively. This is something I'm very involved in the UK, and I speak for them too. It's a huge fundraising experiment using decision science. What makes a person give in a gallery? Where can the ask be put? How can it be different? We did a whole bunch of experiments, and Bernard Ross, with whom I collaborate, I mean, he's the lead, is the person who works on these kind of things. Can Singapore do an arts experiment specifically for fundraising to see what works, what does not work? It's one question to say, how can we make people give to the arts? Well, let's experiment it, and we'll figure out what makes it. And it's one thing to do research, and I have nothing against researchers, but I'm kind of a doer. I would rather test it out rather than just take the kind of the data alone. Data is very important, but with that, if we can combine it with experiments, test, and the best way to find out is testing. Is that possible? Can Singapore do it? Highly likely. If anybody can do it, Singapore should be the one doing it in this part of Asia, so that we can be that resource for the rest of Asia. So in conclusion, when I think of fiscal resilience, fiscal and creativity, it starts with the board and the governance, making sure your board members are being asked these questions. It makes sure that the branding and the fundraising, make sure your financial literacy, make sure you have a strategic plan of where you want to be in the next 5 years in this new normal, so that you know exactly how much you need to raise, why you're raising it. Your case for support is strong because you know exactly why you're raising what you're raising, not just for one show or one gallery exhibition or one experiment, but for something that's long-term. And that makes your donors, your supporters, your influencers want to take the journey with you. And then really looking at our institutions, a brilliant an ecosystem that we have. How are we creating enough curriculum that will help these young artists and arts managers to think in a way that will be fiscally sustainable in the new normal. And these are work that I do. I mean, each of these pillars are consulting work that I do. And hence, I know for a fact that these does work and where some of the gaps are. All right, so that's basically what I wanted to share with you. Happy to take questions as we go along. I know there are some questions that have come up. Flag bearers, flag bearers of the
Usha, I figured you meant flag bearers or standard bearers. We will come back to the questions after the presentations. I've noted several of them. I have some things that you've raised. These are excellent, really making us think on a grander scale. So thank you so much. This was excellent, really bringing the organization and making us think of the ecosystem together. I wanted to move on to Lisis, who is the executive director of the Indonesian Visual Art Archive, an organization with many, many years of working in this space. And she can talk to, what it looks like from their perspective and how they've managed in the new normal. With that, I'll hand it over to Lisis. And thank you so much, Usha. Take it away, Lisis. Thank you.
Thank you, Jane. Thank you, Usha, for the insights and widening up the possibilities for fundraising. I know it's challenging during this time. It's been hard. I mean, it's never been easy, but it's getting more challenging during these days. And I will probably start from a very specific experience because it's based on what we've done, based on what we've experiencing with our organization, Indonesian Visual Arts Archive. And I will probably start with a very short introduction on what IFAA is about, what we are doing, what we are trying to support and promote, and to give the idea the characteristic of our organization. So this is the space of IFAA. We have public library, we have collections of art catalogs, artist monographs, visual arts, references, cultural studies, and basically social and humanities references. And people, or mostly students, curators, artists, can just come and create membership, and they can access our collections. And we have online archive that can be accessed up to now. On-site archive, because some collections are can only be accessed on-site because of administrative things, and some of our collections are donated by artists or the family of the artist. Public library and public programs. The public programs that we have: exhibitions, archive and art exhibitions, workshop on art and archiving, book publishing, and discussions. We have a small library and also a small amphitheater in which people can collaborate for small performance and simple performance, or book discussions, movie discussions, and mostly facilitate young communities. And then I will also, it's kind of flashback of the organization because it started in 1995. In 1995, a group of artists, cultural activists, and journalists started IFAA, but the name was Yayasan Seni Cemeti, or Cemeti Art Foundation. It was founded by Justina Neni, Melayarsma, Nindityo, Agung Kurniawan, and Raihul Fajri, and also Anggi Minarni. They are basically good friends or best friends, and they started during the Reformasi, or almost Reformasi, because in 1995, Indonesia under the Suharto regime, dictator and authoritarian regime. And then during this time, 90s, the practice of contemporary art is getting stronger. Many artists are getting more experimental, and we believe that art has played an important role in guiding, or at least be a company for democracy. And then at the beginning, we haven't focused on archive. We haven't focused merely on archiving. We started to construct or create system that is best suited for us, best applied for this kind of organization, which is not really big, but specific. And then we also develop exchange programs and facilitate collaborative programs between artists and wider public. And we provide data, information, documentation on Indonesian contemporary art. And in 2016 to up to now, we can say that it is the third generation of IFAA. We still maintain our online archive, and we started to questioning what archiving means in today's society. I mean, when we use the context when we put it in the Indonesia context, we have very diverse cultural dynamics. And we believe that archiving is also dynamics and also diverse in practices. So we want to explore that. So beside archiving, we also do questioning archiving. So we have first floor for the public library and second floor, Tangam is there. And second floor for our collections on archives. And in terms of sustainability or fiscal sustainability, we have to see ourselves as a foundation. It's a legal entity that should differentiate between the assets of the founders and the foundation. And as a foundation, as a public foundation, we can access public funding. Grant maker, from the grant maker, private institution, government, or sometimes individual institutions. And as a foundation, IFAA can also run business according to related fields, as long as it is still within the context of archiving, contemporary art, art development, education, and knowledge production. We can run business. And what we have been trying to do so far is that from the library, there is a membership fee. And then from the archive requests, since we have online archives that can be accessed for free, but we have also some archives, some collections, materials that can only be accessed through certain certain specific mechanism by archive request through form, and then having discussion with our archivist. And then there is usually archive maintenance cost because we don't sell materials, but it is obliged for the public to pay the archive maintenance cost. And what we keep as our materials is the copy of the records, the copy of the arts, the copy of the discourses on arts. And we have IFA shop, IFA merchandise, artist merchandise, books. We sell our books and we sell the books from the communities around us. IFA merchandise itself is mostly collaborative. It is mostly conducted collaborative with artists, emerging artists, and it is for both sustainability. It is we do this also to promote and to support artists, mostly the emerging one. And we have small rooms. We planned this and designed these rooms for residency, but during the pandemic, we cannot also operate this. And as an archive institution who have started since 1995, we started from last year. We already confident enough to be consultant to build archive system creation, but for art institutions, as long as the organizations or institution still in the context of art ecosystem, we have several schemes or several methods for building and constructing the archive system. So the first scheme is we can make for them, but it's not recommended because the process is not participative. I mean, they don't really involve to map and understand the characteristic of the materials of the archives. What we usually recommend to the art communities or art organizations for them to conduct when they want to build their archives is the participatory method, in which we use this both side, like they do, or the art communities who have the materials, they do their task, and we also do our task, and we meet in the middle. So it's based on dialogue, based on constructing the art archives together. And we quite fortunate that we have data storage, which is quite relatively enough and big to rent, and small spaces to rent for meeting or for discussions. But it's sometimes we use it for social engagement. I mean, it's not always to rent, but it's for mostly for public engagement, YouTube subscription and investment. And then the last one, but it has played biggest role in our financial situation, is program ads. Since as an institution of archives, we also conduct archive festival. So it is also our strategy to raise fund and also to save money for not really long term, but when we can save like for 2 or 3 years to run this organization, we can say that it's already enough. I don't know, maybe Usha can give insight whether we can say that it's sustained or not, because when we take a look at our administrative notes, it's the pattern is more or less like that. Like we do saving based on the public programs, because during the public programs we can access government's public funds, and then we can also raise funds from program ads from other institutions as well. So basically, social funds is for public programs mostly. And this is the example of the public program that we did last year during pandemic. It was, we did adjustment, because at the beginning we designed this program as an archive festival that involves many people from many places, but then we have to localize it in order to make it possible in order to conduct this festival. So we were working with people from our neighborhood, from Ifaa neighborhood, to explore the knowledge of our society. So we shift the word of archivist, we put it in a wider context. We believe that everyone is archivist, everyone has their own story, everyone is also ethnography, and they are also historian. So this one Puji Istanto, who has story on this neighborhood. It's also another example of storytelling. And we also collected photos and materials from the neighborhood as well. It basically highlights the agency of every people who live in our neighborhood. They have shaped the history. They have built the value within this community. So we basically just highlight what already existed in our neighborhood. So it's a combination of art and archive exhibition and also performance. It is more manageable to do because we don't have to go or travel, and it doesn't deal with mobility, which is complicated during this time. But it's still fun, it's still festive, it's still knowledge producing, and it's still operated as our strategy to sustain not only we as an institution or organization, but we also sustain with our community, with our neighbors, because many our neighbors are artists, local artists and traditional art. They practice traditional art, and during pandemic, no jobs available for them. So it is also a way we build our sustainability to be strong together. And another festival that we held, it's still the same for this one. The first archive festival in 2017, it involves a wider public because the situation is more manageable. And from this kind of program, we can do saving. We can also popularize archiving, because in Indonesian context, sometimes archiving word sounds, sounds alien, sounds not familiar, not so popular in our context. So it's the way we popularize archives, and also the way we promote and support local artists, and also the way we trying to sustain in a creative way, but also fun, and we enjoy doing it. And another challenge that we have to face is nowadays that the Indonesian government has promised arts and culture endowment. The President Jokowi has already stated in 2018. But today, in 2021, is only a fifth. So it means, because President Jokowi has promised 5 5 trillion rupiah. I don't know how is it in English, 5 trillion rupiah. But the realization in 2021 is only a fifth. It means only 1 trillion rupiah. And basically, we don't want to compete. Yeah, I mean, we understand that this situation is difficult for everyone, and it affects our sector as well. I mean, IFA is no exception. There are many programs that is forced to be canceled, and since the mid of 2020, Indonesia now upper middle income country, which means that many grant-making organizations have been reducing support to civil society organizations in Indonesia. And we don't want to compete with other sectors such as environment, medical, livelihood. I mean, those sectors are also basic for human beings. We understand that for some people, art is maybe considered merely as an entertainment, but we sometimes also forget that the position of art as a perspective in seeing or envision our life, our new normal life is also important. And yeah, so within Indonesian context, we at least have two situations which is really affecting our economic situation. The endowment of the arts, that we are really hopeful with that. And then the national situation, and then the international situation. Maybe that's all from my presentation. Looking forward to the discussions. Thank you.
Thank you, Lysis. You raise a lot of good points for the arts sector. I have quite a few questions for you when we get to the panel. We are running a little short on time. Kola, I'm going to move to you. I think you were going to talk about some of the overall trends that we're seeing in philanthropy, and then we're going to bring it back to the panel in about 5 to 10 minutes. So thank you, Lysis, and I'll turn it over to you, Kola.
Just going to turn it to, okay, hope everyone able to see the slides. This is Kola. I will focus my presentation more on the fundraising aspects to ensure sustainability of an art and culture institution like ourselves. I guess this, to start off with, again, we're quite fortunate being in Singapore that we can rely on a government grant as one of the main stay of funding. So I would encourage everybody who have access to your own ministry, National Art Council, cultural matching funds to trying to maximize that. Of course, there's also the Tote Board, which I couldn't quite place them whether part of the government or private sector grant. But I think with COVID, organizations like Toad is also putting out additional funding opportunity, including the enhanced fundraising scheme, for example. So I encourage everybody to take advantage of that. In Singapore context, I guess if you look at government grant versus business revenue and philanthropic activity through donations, generally it's, we can, sort of like 70% of the funds will come from government. The remaining 30% probably is quite even between business revenue and donations. We're quite fortunate to have that, because if you compare that to the UK, it's probably more a third of funding coming from each sources. And then, of course, in the US, most of our comparable cultural institutions are privately funded. So they really have to rely on their board of trustees, their original founders, as well as continuing support from the philanthropy sector. The business revenue for the gallery, it's quite diverse. One thing I'd like to highlight is that, for example, not all of our exhibitions are ticketed. particularly those presented from our own national collections. They're normally presented with free admissions to Singaporean and PR. Now, that itself could also be a fundraising opportunity, because if you're able to articulate why funders should support us, or the private sector should support us, because we're not able to, sell tickets for admissions, then I think donors would be quite generous to come on board. You can see that we are quite diversified in our business revenue. That includes venue rental. Some of the best F&Bs in Singapore can be found at the gallery. We have the museum shop, we have membership sales, and then we have car park fees as well. Now, today I'm going to focus more on the donations and the private sector grant, because this is, I guess, a key component of complementing our funding source from the government and our business revenue. We have been fortunate to have support from the individual, corporate, as well as foundation sector. But I think what is key in the sustainability, promoting sustainability in the longer term, is to ensure that we have sufficient support for the general vision and mission of the gallery of an institution, so that those donations can be in a form of unrestricted fund. Because when you have unrestricted fund, you are able to use them to build a reserve over time. And for the gallery, we're fortunate to be able to build a sufficiently large reserve to be able to put them to work by appointing external fund managers to manage those funds. And we have decided also to place a small portion of that into endowment fund to protect the principles. So and then of course for donors who want to direct their donation to a specific cause, they will still be wanting to provide some form of restricted donations. But I would encourage everyone to consider having as much of your donations placed into an unrestricted pool as possible. That will ensure or will allow us to be more sustainable in the longer term when you have a reserve. For example, with COVID, we're quite fortunate that we do have a reserve, but we don't have to tap into it. But we know that if you have to run a budget deficit because of a crisis, there's opportunity to tap into the reserve. Now, fundraising, it's really a long-term, mission. It's not one that you would change courses for the short term. Of course, COVID has presented challenges to the fundraising scene, but we need to look at the longer term trend. I think we spent a lot of time looking at so that we can anticipate the trends. And I'm just flashing some of those that is important to notice, to pay attention to. While historically we've been going to the baby boomers and the first generation of philanthropies, I think for those giving you money and for purpose of leaving a legacy is important to them. But for the younger generations, for the next generation, many are also looking at investing into other technology startups. So we must be aware that they are competing, source of demand in terms of placing a family assets into to ensure longer term sustainability of these donors. So there are competing causes to philanthropic activities. We can also see increasing number of Chinese who are migrating to Singapore or moving their international headquarters to Singapore. I think this is another significant opportunity that we can look into. Thanks to the, policies from the US, we are hearing many of the tech companies in China is moving to Singapore and set up the international headquarters. And the most recent being, C Group has donated 50 million to National University of Singapore. So I would encourage everyone also to look at additional source from our traditional source of donors. Chinese market is one, but I'm sure India is also minting many billionaires, and that could also be another potential source. The generation differences is important to note, because I mentioned that boomers cares about the testimony effect, leaving a legacy for the family. But when you start talking to the millennial and the Gen Z, they're really more keen about looking at how can you create impact for society and for the community if they were to support you. So I think this is where knowing the underlying motivation for giving by each individual, by each family is very important. Of course, ESG is also a major trend. Many of the younger generations care about the environment, about social issues, social impact. So when we just focus on the message of art and culture, it may not necessarily resonate. But if you are able to articulate how art can also help, unite people in a challenging environment, art can also help healing, and how art can inspire to various programs, I think that will resonate much better with our donors. The other significant trend we believe is the advent of 5G that allow us to do, all of us actually to collect a lot more data, to doing big data analytics, and also using virtual experience, because with 5G, the speed of transmission is much faster. So you can actually also pivot to using mobile as a tool to reach out to the younger ones, and also using virtual programming to reach out to the audience when physical visits is no longer possible during a crisis. So fundraising in a new normal, I guess we'll just summarize with some key impact we see, key trends in recent months or the last 18 months, given the advent of COVID. So clearly in terms of giving to the communities impacted by COVID is the main priority for most donors. So we do have to look at how, as a sector, we can also benefit the communities. For example, the gallery does a program to bring the migrant workers, especially those who are working, helping us at home. We conduct tours for the migrant workers called the Sister Guide. So if you have a program like this, I think it resonates much better when you go to donors and say, hey, with COVID impacting the larger community, how can we help those who normally do not have the opportunity to experience the museum? Not all corporates are doing badly during COVID. In fact, many are striving, but the challenge is that even for those who are striving, they would be more concerned about giving to community immediately impacted by COVID. And those, even if they are doing well, they might want to conserve cash, or it may not be appropriate for them to be seen to be giving large amount to people who are not impacted by the pandemic. So pivoting to getting individual support is another opportunity for all of us. I have a couple of examples where the gallery has done so, but I guess in the interest of time, we can leave that to later on for Q&A. But one consistency is the foundations, because foundations normally already have built up a certain reserve. They have an endowment, and their mandate is to give out money. So it's pretty consistent, and therefore we should continue to look out for support from foundation, not just from Singapore, but don't be afraid to reach out to foundations in the US and UK. For example, at the museum, we do get the support from Terra Foundation because their mandate is to promote American art to the global audience. So if the mandate resonates with what our program has, then it's a good way to approach them. Even the likes of the Bloomberg Foundation, the Fidelity Foundations, they do support institutions in Asia. Nearer to home, you even have the likes of the Rockefeller and the Ford Foundations, but their cause is to support the underprivileged. And therefore, we for foundations, we must be mindful what is their mandate, so that when we approach them, we can be very effective. Critical success factor in the new normal, I think when we pivot to individuals, it's important to ensure that we have built a relationship with each individual, each family, and personalize the message. We know what their cause of giving. I always believe that people give it to an institution because of three factors. One, the cause must be consistent with their own passion. So if the family is passionate about certain area of focus, then you need to bring programs that resonate with them. Second, people give to institution and people they trust. So how do you build a trust? And you cannot build trust without deepening your relationship with them. And third is showing impact, especially the younger donors. You really need to show the impact that you help create with their donations. And in pivoting, we have also embraced the general public to broaden our support base beyond the wealthy individuals and the patrons. Because if you're able to use a platform to reach out to millions of people, then $5 from a few million is as good as a large amount from one or two. So that's something that we have also tried and collaborated with some e-commerce platform. Of course, with COVID, we have also gone digital in many of our networking events. We find it continue to be effective when you do a physical event that could be just a dialogue between our curators and the artists, but you live stream that to a broader audience. And I think to that, we can continue to maintain our connection with the audience despite the inability for them to visit, especially for overseas supporters. And one of the trends we talked about earlier is the advent of 5G. So mobile first is important. And that actually allows to pipe video content and to use of social media. So that's an area that we will continue to explore. And finally, I guess, until everyone is vaccinated, I think safety first in terms of, reaching out to our donors and organizing networking event on site. And I talk about resonating with the donors. Fortunately, at the gallery, funding our collection, we have, an art adoption program. We have pivoted to reach out to the public by adopting, a blockchain technology to allow even smaller donors to adopt artwork starting from $50. So an example that I would love to share later on. Curatorial research, I think we're very pleased. I think we did have a collaboration with Lisa's unit. If you go to the facility there, you'll see IVAA. One of the exhibits is a collaboration with Indonesian Visual Arts Archive. Exhibitions is always key to us, but what we have pivoted is to allow individuals, patrons to be associated with exhibitions and programs. And I can share some of the example how our community program and education and publication has also been able to win support from individual patrons who care about these areas and decided that they want to be associated with programs and exhibitions with a larger gift. I think I'll pause there and I'll wait for we can share any of this specific example during the Q&A. Thank you.
Kola, thank you so much for that prescient summary on some of the trends. Actually, what really struck me in all of your presentations was the optimism really around the arts, despite the challenges that COVID has thrown up. And one of the things that hit me is the community piece. It seems that, and Lysis, it really struck me when you were speaking is, you really talk a lot about working and pulling the community in closer. And I think, Kola, you also said the same thing with the National Gallery, that in some ways we're looking at new audiences and different audiences and bringing them closer to what we're doing. Was that something precipitated by COVID? Is this a pivot that you found? Lysis, I'll turn to you, I think, for that question. It seems like you've really pulled the community a lot into the work that you're doing. Is this something you've done differently since COVID came down as a strategy? I'll start with you.
Thank you, Jane. Yeah, long before COVID or pandemic hit us, we've been wondering what kind of organization we have. I mean, when we think about our engagement
I think Liz.
Sorry, I think we've lost Liz's. Kola, while we're waiting for Lysis to come back on, can I direct that question to you? It seems like you've been doing a lot in the community.
Sure, I can share a few that a couple that we have launched recently and been met with good response. So, for example, I don't know you're able to see the screen. Hope so. Wait. Let me just talk through it. One of the program we have is called the Art and Access Program, Art with You. What we do there is to collaborate with the Alzheimer's Disease Association to allow their stakeholders or their beneficiaries to come and appreciate art along with the caregivers. And that's been met with very good response. And when we reach out to the majority trust, for example, they were very happy to support us as to make the program possible. At the gallery, we also developed a art and wellness program. And that underneath that is the idea of art heals and art unite. So under the art and wellness program, we have various programs, including the idea of having a slow art, which allows audience to experience art on their own on a very slow pace, and then be able to share with one another how does the art resonates with them. And we also I talked about sister guides earlier on, where we reach out to the foreign domestic communities that was locked in, within their homebound, and therefore I think the opportunity to be able to experience art is something that they treasure. It's very healing. So because of that, I think we are able to share with some of our donors who understood the power of art to help the healing process during COVID. So they came on board and become a program patrons. So this is an area that sort of engaging the community. The other ways we engage the community is really through collaborating with e-commerce platforms that's able to reach out to the millions I mentioned earlier on. So one of our recent program in pivoting and embracing the general public as our donor was to collaborate with Shopee. I hope everybody has shopped on Shopee. As you know, Shopee, if you shop with them, there is a Shopee rebate, or they call it Shopee coins. And you as a customer can choose to either spend the Shopee coin dividends on buying more products from them, or you can actually donate your Shopee coins to an institutions who is a beneficiary, adopted as a beneficiary by Shopee. So we collaborated with Shopee and said, hey, can you adopt us as a donor? But we also want to make sure it's a win-win opportunity. So we'll market our membership program exclusively on Shopee for a 3 months period, where it's marketed as a one-for-one promotion. But what's even more interesting is that, we did a live stream to kick off that campaign. And instead of just having our curators talking through the Georgette Chen exhibition, which is a wonderful show that everybody should see, we actually invited Shopee influencer to have a dialogue with our curator and, talk about an exhibitions that can relate to the Shopee customer. So I think with that sort of live stream, and this is the first time we're doing it and experimenting it. So throughout the live stream, of course, we'll then talk about marketing the membership program, but also encouraging donation to the gallery. I'm sure this is one of the initiatives we will continue to do going forward and collaborating with other partners.
Thank you, Kola. That sounds like an incredible initiative. And it strikes me that there has been a lot of creativity going back to what Usha said in the beginning. I think the lockdown and the pandemic has really forced us into a situation where we have to start considering alternatives. Lysis, I think you're back. I apologize for a little bit, but you just started to talk about the community. But I'm wondering, because I know Kola's just spoken to that question. The other thing that struck me is you've been around for a while, the organization. What do you do in terms of keeping the leadership renewed? Now you're on the third generation, and I wanted to kind of pivot to this because succession planning, particularly for arts organizations, is often fraught, and it's really been a difficult challenge in this pandemic. How do you keep that leadership renewal going? Is this something that you're embedding in the organization, the adaptability, the flexibility?
Thanks, Jane. That's also my question. That's also our question. We've also had this question on regeneration, how we maintain and have fresh leader, have fresh staff, and maintain IVA as a space for learning, and give many space and opportunities also for young people. It doesn't have to be people with high education or high educated profile, but those who have passion in doing archives and also involved in art practices. That's also important. We in IVA, we have internship programs, internship for students, for young people. It doesn't have certain requirements, but yeah, internship is our way or method in maintaining the refreshment of the team. And I probably want to continue the previous question on how we involve or collaborate with our neighborhood. It's actually a COVID situation or pandemic situation was only a momentum, because long before that, we were trying to auto criticize our existence as an institution of archive and art. Both terms are very elitist. If we don't engage with people or with public, I mean, we will lose our relevance. And because we work for public, for society, popularize archive and art, and autocriticism is necessary.
Lysis, can I ask you, is that something that you as an organization do quite frequently, or was this the first time you as an organization had asked yourselves, what is your mission, what is your vision, what is your value within the community? Do you do that frequently, or was this a fairly milestone moment?
That's frequently. That is frequently. But it becomes stimulate program when it's milestone, right? I mean, annually we have evaluation, then program designing, and then we have focus group discussions with people from outside IVA to have better view on IVA, because sometimes we as staff, sometimes we don't see clear enough what our mission and how relevant we are for our society. So it's basically, I mean, the anxiety or the questions is like our daily questions. But when it comes to program designing, yeah, but basically the spirit is the question that we have in our daily work.
Okay, thank you, Lysis. I would ask Usha, because you work with a lot of different clients. And Usha, in the beginning, you talked about sometimes there are missed opportunities, that too often our financial people are separate from our creative people, and there's no just bringing this together, and it's a missed opportunity. Can you speak to that a little bit in terms of what you've observed with some of your clients how they've pivoted. Is there more working together? Is there less? How does that look?
I think like all families, a crisis does help the family to come together. So even within an organization, because they know that, the ticketing is dropping or the footfalls are dropping and all of that, they know something has to be done. So there is a more engagement. And I would say right from the board level. Because in the past, it was like the executive director or the department heads just reporting to the board, that we're doing this, we're doing that, and they kind of just approve to a large extent, and it is okay. But now the board has to realize, some are realizing, some still needs to realize that they really need to know what exactly this organization is about. And as Lisa said, constantly thinking, what exactly is our mission and vision? Can we just stop doing it because we don't have money or a certain source of funding is not happening? Or should we figure out a way to make it happen? And that, to me, is the best thing in the crisis. But whether we are stepping up to take advantage, leverage that situation, some organizations are, some we are taking along, kicking and screaming. But so, things like evaluating the organization, financial, fundraising, program strengths, as well as weaknesses, for example, is one area. Then they are finding aha moments to say, oh, yeah, that's why, our budgeting process didn't take into consideration these elements. That's why we always ran out of money, at the end of the month. And that realization is happening because now they have to hunker down and figure out where they can save, where they can, expand, where they can conserve. And that's, I would say, is not necessarily a good thing, but the crisis has brought the team together. In some cases.
Yeah, it does seem to have a little bit, really looking and really prioritizing where you have scarce resources. I want to move a little bit. I know that we're running out of time, and this topic we could talk about this all day and into next week. But I just wanted to take some questions that have come in. So one of the questions is unrestricted funding. How do you persuade donors to give to unrestricted funding? Kola, I think I will direct that to you, but if anyone else on the panel wants to address it, but I think Kola, you have quite extensive experience in this.
Yeah. I guess for donors, whether individual or corporate, if they believe in the vision of the institutions, they'll be happy to support on unrestricted basis to help build financial sustainability of an organizations. So the message has to be that, because yes, we should also be raising funds for program and exhibition, but if you only do that, then you're forever on a treadmill, raising funds for the current program or upcoming program, right? So you have to convince the donors because I think one of the key elements of supporting an institution is you have to show that you have a strategy to be sustainable. And I think for large institutions, donors, I think they'll be happy to support you as an organization if you are able to articulate your vision that resonates with them and convince them that we need to build a long-term reserve to ensure that we can tap into our reserve as and when necessary to meet with crises like one that's presented by COVID. So I think it's how we articulate that. I'm not saying that it's an easy task, but you can. And also, for example, our annual gift program by our patrons, we give them a choice of checking whether they want to restrict their gift to a program, exhibitions, or a particular area. But we also leave a box to say, support our general vision and mission, and many will check that box too.
Thank you.
I have a point that I would like to add. One of the things that I do ask patrons or donors is, hey, have you benefited from the job support scheme? And they were like, oh yeah, X number, I have Y number of staff. I said, oh great, good, Singapore had a reserve because they can keep us all, employed. What about the charity that or this organization that you're supporting? How will you ensure that they can sustain if they don't have a reserve? or they don't have the ability to maintain stuff when crisis, and it kind of is an aha moment to say, oh yeah, I'm a beneficiary of someone else's better financial management. Now let me be a benefactor to your better financial management. So that kind of.
Thank you for that. Thank you. Thank you very much. We are running out of time. Unfortunately, I did want to ask each of you, and I will start with Lysis. If there was one thing that you could say to the audience today that you think that they should be thinking about as we pivot to the new normal, what should they be thinking about? Lysis, what advice would you have for these organizations?
I wish I'll be the last so I can have the moment to think. But yeah, during the new normal, I mean, it is in time of crisis, it is for everyone. This difficulty is faced by everyone. Public will know and they can evaluate the relevance on our organizations. If they evaluate that we have still values and still important to them, then public will automatically support us. And sometimes, of course, I agree to Kola and also Usha how to articulate our vision and mission well to the donors. And sometimes also when we keep our work relevant, socially relevant, the donors just can see themselves. I mean, they want to support the relevant organizations and reliable organizations.
Thank you.
Sometimes they don't really strict for administrative things. Thank you, Jane.
Thank you, Lysis. Usha, if you'd just like to say a few words, we literally have a couple of minutes left before I hand back over to Vaish.
All right, so for me, it is really looking at the organization as a whole, not just the fundraising components of the organization, so that we know exactly where we can enhance, where we need to. Sometimes it's legacy. We started doing certain things because some donor somewhere gave us the money for that. And over time, that donor has moved on. And we continue to deliver it, although it may not be necessarily core to our competency or our mission for that matter. So really reevaluating some of that and honing down what you really meant to deliver and ensuring you deliver the best quality. And if you tell that story, government funding is one, fiscal funding is one, but leveraging to say 50% of our funding is already taken care of. We need you to come on board for the other 50% or 30%, whatever the case may be. Leveraging that government support is the way I would do it.
Thank you. Thank you, Usha. Kola?
Yep, I think COVID or not, fundraising is for the long haul. So continue to know your donor very well, what motivates them to give. Have a message that resonates with their cause. That's very important, what they're passionate about. To build trust, and you can only build trust by really deepening your relationship, and especially when they are not doing very well, whether, everyone's affected by COVID. So stay with your donor, even though for that particular year, they may not be ready to support you. Continue to build that relationship. And finally, demonstrate impact. Don't just take the money. You need to demonstrate how you have helped create impact with the money they've donated. You do all these three, whether it's a new normal or not, we have to continue to do that as fundraiser. Thank you.
Thank you all, Usha, Lysis, and Kola, for sharing your insight. That was a really wonderful panel and presentations. Vaish, I'll turn it back over to you to finish.
Hi, thank you, Jane. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your questions. I think you would agree that it has been a very engaging session, and we hope that you have been inspired to meet the new normal where fiscal sustainability is concerned. We'd like to take this opportunity to thank our speakers and moderator for sharing their insights and for the robust discussions we had today. We have come to the end of today's In Conversation with webinar. Before you leave the session, we appreciate if you could provide us with your feedback for today's webinar. You may access the feedback form via the link or scan the QR code shown on the screen here. If you'd like to find out more about Culture Academy's programs, please visit cultureacademy.gov.sg, and you may check out our past webinars and resources that may be of interest to you. Thank you for joining us today, and we look forward to seeing you at our next webinar in July. Till then, stay safe and stay healthy. Thank you.